Welcome to M&A Talk, the #1 podcast on all things related to mergers and acquisitions. Brought to you by Morgan and Westfield.
When is the right time then to start thinking about an exit strategy?
I really believe from day one when the business has started. However, so few people do that. So I'm going to say ideally it would at least at the very minimum be 2 years ahead of when you want to sell. And, Jacob, that's a great question, too, because I can't tell you the number of people who have come to me in the last couple of years and COVID has just worn them out, right? They want the business sold like yesterday, and that just doesn't happen. I mean, is that your experience?
You're flipping the table on me there.
Sorry.
Wendy. No, I like it. It's good. I don't usually have guests ask me questions, but I like it. And for the listeners, yes, I've been doing this for 20 years. And I would agree with you. I'd say the minority do plan their exit, and the minority meaning in the single digits for sure. And the majority, I'd say 90% plus, don't plan it out more than 6 months in advance. There's some, maybe 10 or 20% that maybe plan it out 3 to 6 months in advance. And then the majority just kind of have a bad day and pick up the phone. And I've been thinking about it for a while and I want to sell. It sounds like that's been your experience too, right?
Yes, and I'm nodding my head, listeners, because Jacob is spot on. That's exactly what seems to happen. You said a bad day. It could be, again, COVID. I've had 3 or 4 owners come to me and say that they wanted to sell and they needed to sell, quote unquote, needed to sell immediately because their energy was gone. And I mean, you and I could probably go on for hours about what the various tipping points are for different people. But what I have seen is that it is like that. Something happens and they're like, that's it. I'm done. Click.
We see that all the time. And of course, I think, and with your husband as an investment banker, by the way, what size companies does your husband typically sell?
He works with the lower middle market. So his deal size ranges from, 30, 35 million and above.
And does he have the same experience, or when you get up into the bigger companies, do they tend to do a little bit more planning?
Unfortunately, while they may have thought about selling the business, ultimately, they really, as far as actual writing down a plan, communicating that plan, and taking steps to implement that plan, do very little.
Well, that brings up a good question. And by the way, to the listeners, I'm going to talk to you directly right now. Hopefully you've listened to quite a few episodes here on M&A Talk. This is a recurring theme. Everyone says the same thing. All the professionals say the same thing. Anyone that's been through an exit says the same thing. They say plan, 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 plan. Because if you do, the exit's going to go so much smoother and you're going to get top dollar for your company. To the listeners listening to this right now, they're probably thinking, what can I actually do? What can I plan? What do I need to address? What is your response to that? And I think this is going to be probably the rest of the show, what the components of an exit plan, but why do they need to plan their exit? And what are the components of that plan?
First of all, I would agree with you that those owners who do plan have a much easier time presenting their business in a way that they actually ultimately obtain the highest dollar. And again, I will say that sometimes purchase price isn't necessarily the deciding factor. And I think that's where your question comes in about steps to take. So first of all, sitting down and with the other stakeholders, what do you want out of a sale? Is it a certain number? Well, okay, if it's a certain number, let's come up with the data to support that number.
Is there anything else that you think we need to discuss to kind of set the table in terms of the overall exit planning process and what is an exit plan or what an exit plan is before we kind of jump into the various components of an exit plan?
The first decision I think has to be made, Jacob, once the owner and the stakeholders have come up with the ideal buyer, the price, and the desired outcome, is they need to decide, are they going to do this themselves or are they going to hire an intermediary? Now, I've already owned, number one, I'm not an accountant. I'm not an attorney. But I am married to an investment banker. I'm not a business broker or banker myself, but I will tell you that I have seen many, many people who try to DIY things. And, folks, I get it. I understand our need for control. are a desire to save money. Those are all legitimate concerns. At the same time, if you try to DIY the sale of your company, if your company is really an asset, you have taken a huge risk by DIYing this because number one, you're not able to qualify the buyers. Number two, you have to have an evaluation that is either a broker's opinion of value or a valuation done by an outside, independent, certified intermediary. Also, you've got to understand that you could be leaving money on the table. Now, Jacob, I'm now going to discount something you and I were talking about earlier, but it just goes to show there are exceptions to every rule. In general, the clients that I speak with have miscalculated the valuation of their company. They have assumed it's worth more than it actually is. On occasion, I have heard of owners who have assumed that their company is worth a certain amount because of perhaps an unsolicited offer from a strategic partner or a competitor. And so they come in and they're like, yeah, my company's worth $35 million. And lo and behold, the valuation comes in and it is way above that. So do you really want to take a chance as a DIYer on something like that? I certainly wouldn't.
M&A Talk is brought to you by Morgan & Westfield, a nationwide leader in mergers and acquisitions for small to mid-market companies. If you've enjoyed this show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Learn more at morganandwestfield.com. While we take reasonable care to select recognized experts for our podcast, please note that each podcast presents the independent opinions of such experts only and not of Morgan & Westfield. We make no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information provided. Any reliance on the podcast information is at your own risk. The podcast is for general information only and cannot be considered legal or professional advice.